What was the time you had a gut feeling about something, ignored it, then ended up being right about it in the end? My father-in-law was a piece of shit in my mind. I just didn't get a good read off of him. It was a big conflict with my wife and I just didn't like him and had no reason to feel the way I did. 2 years after he died, we found out he had sexually assaulted his stepdaughter, my wife's half-sister, from ages 12-17. A few years later, we discovered that he actually got her pregnant and paid for her to have an abortion during that time. He really was a piece of shit. Gonna try to make this story as brief as possible. Late one night, I was riding my bike on the sidewalk, coming home with groceries. I saw this dude standing between the street and the sidewalk up ahead and felt sketched out. I thought about going into the street instead of past him, but there was no driveway or anything. So I just kept going forward. Bad call. That guy and 2 of his friends mugged me, and I had to have emergency eye surgery that night. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend. My friend had a boyfriend who just gave me bad vibes when we talked on the phone. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about him rubbed me the wrong way. Then about a year into the relationship, he says we can't see each other. After she asked me to come hang out with her and her friends, I told her I didn't feel comfortable meeting him, so I never did. He ended up murdering her. My mom was a crazy hippie. I moved out at 16 and was eventually able to establish a close but cautious relationship with her. At this point, she was living on a boat in the Florida Keys. I loved her dearly, but she suffered from addictions and was in a relationship that was terribly abusive. I started having nightmares about her boyfriend calling me. In the dreams, he would tell me she fell off the boat and they couldn't find her. My gut told me I couldn't be the one to save her. She was a grown woman making her choices. I decided to go no contact again, but I kept putting off the conversation. I'd do it after her birthday. 2 days before her birthday, I got the call. She fell into the ocean while intoxicated and her body wasn't found until the next morning. I woke up after spending the night at my friend's house and had a gut feeling that he had died. I ignored it 4 hours waiting for him to wake up. Finally went in his room and found him dead. My husband has a lot of health problems. Insomnia is regular occurrence. One night he couldn't sleep. He couldn't get comfortable. Had nausea. He had pain. These weren't uncommon symptoms for him, but it seemed a little worse than usual. I knew that heart attack symptoms can be subtle and often are mistaken for heartburn or stomach upset. I told him this and suggested we go to the hospital to play it safe. He said no. Months later, he had some testing done and we learned that he'd had a silent heart attack. They couldn't give us a date, but the time frame matched up with that night he couldn't sleep. I should have put my foot down and made him go to the hospital. If you're reading this, learn the symptoms of a heart attack and of a stroke. Anytime you're concerned about the possibility of a heart attack or stroke, get it checked out by a healthcare professional. When I was a teenager, I was riding in the car with some friends. The driver was speeding a little and acting like an idiot in general. We stopped so he could switch out a CD. This was in the 90s. I had a bad feeling he was going to eventually wreck the car and someone would die or get hurt badly. I almost got out of the car. I didn't though. We did end up wrecking less than 20 minutes later. I came close to severing an artery in my neck when we crashed. Everyone else's injuries were fairly minor, including the driver. His reckless actions caused the accident. I wish I would have trusted my gut instinct. When I was a kid, my mom and I were going to a friend's house for a play date. I did not want to leave the house. I wanted to bring my favorite things, because I knew they weren't safe at home. She wouldn't let me. We went to the play date, and when we came home the entire house was on fire. We lost 99% of our stuff. My neighbor, who didn't leave much, always parked his car in the same spot, right in view of my bedroom window. A snowstorm was going all weekend. On day 4 of the storm, I was sitting in bed watching TV, looked out and saw his car had not moved all week. The snow was piled up and the drifts were pristine. Got that icky feeling, but figured I was being paranoid. Woke up in the middle of the night to his body being carried out by EMTs. His kidneys had failed and he was incapable of seeking help in his last few days. Stuck in his house alone. Still makes me sick thinking about it. Another story was my mill. I'm going to preface this with the fact that I watched quite a few of my family members pass when I was age 10 and younger. I became almost numb to the idea and instead focused on the intricacies of their conditions. After all, there isn't much for a kid to do sitting in a room with a person waiting to expire. There was a smell that always stuck with me when they were close to death, almost like a sweet rotten smell. Back to the story. One day she was talking to me and the smell hit me like a ton of bricks. A few weeks later she was diagnosed with stage 3 mouth cancer. Posts like these always freak me out, because I get weird gut feelings, but mine are wrong 100% of the time. Before Ovid, my daughter went to a kid's birthday party from school. I dropped her and her friend off to a house full of kids, and the parents of the birthday boy were both there, along with some parents of some of the kids. The dad was creepy, like, he just gave me weirdo vibes. I told myself in the car I was being a piece of judgmental shit and that he's just an odd dude. They have 4 kids. The mom has a craft business. They seemed normal. No, I was right. A few months ago he was arrested for child peeing. I will always trust my gut from now on, judgmental or not. I was 25, working at a new job, and everything was off. I kept having abnormal thoughts about my mom. Found out she was dead that afternoon. I was visiting family in California, LA area. I was walking home from a newly opened thrift store near my grandparents' house. At that time I was with my older sister, who a week or 2 prior had my second nephew. I started to get the feeling that at some point we were going to get hit by something. I wasn't exactly sure what, but I had that feeling. I kept pushing it off since around that area, and especially at that time, there may have been maybe 5 cars going down both ways of the street. We were just about to round a corner to get back onto the street by my grandparents, when I felt like I honestly needed to puke from how bad of a feeling I got. I ended up pushing my sister and my nephews away towards the wall of the house on the corner, and almost immediately I got clipped by a car that had gotten T-boned while speeding. Luckily my nephews and my sister were alright, but I needed surgery on my leg and a portion of my hip. In undergrad, my sister and I lived in a house my parents bought, and we had roommates. My sister had gotten a new guy that was moving in after summer holidays. I met him the day he moved in. I was upstairs, met him, shook his hand, went down to the basement suite, called my mom and told her there's no way I would have let that guy move in. She asked me why, and I just said I had a bad feeling about him. He was in the house 2 months before we evicted him, for many reasons. Police had to get involved. It was messy. Fast forward a few months and we'd got back from Christmas holidays and the house had been completely trashed. We told the cops right away we thought it was him. They said they knew him well. The insurance claim was $160,000. We lived in a hotel for 3 months while they rebuilt the house. The police genuinely thought he tried to kill us. He ended up confessing when he was in treatment, but got off due to temporary insanity caused by methamphetamines. I highly recommend everyone to re-listen to The Gift of Fear by Gavin D. Becker. He goes into great detail about why we have gut feelings and how oftentimes we are picking up on things we aren't totally aware of. It's a fantastic book that makes you have a better appreciation for those gut feelings. The first time I met the teacher my autistic daughter was going to have in elementary school, we were chatting about my daughter, and she went over and sat in a rocking chair in the classroom, and the teacher's reaction was just over the top. She actually yelled at her, "No, no, no, that is Mrs. R's chair, little Missy." I was gobsmacked, but then I second-guessed myself, told myself that I was just being overprotective, etc. I should have listened to my gut. Mrs. R was caught pulling a neurotypical student down the hallway by his leg while he was laying on his stomach, and then she dropped his backpack on top of him. She was arrested for this, but was still able to return to work, with the addition of cameras in her classroom. While out in bond a few months later, she was caught abusing one of the autistic kids in her class multiple times, allegedly smacking him on at least one occasion with her flip-flop. After the second incident, our local newspaper shared an article they had written about this teacher many years earlier when she was 12, and had murdered a 14-year-old classmate by stabbing her in the heart. I went to a yoga training camp and everything felt off to me and I was uncomfortable the whole time. 4 years later, there are multiple podcasts about how it's a cult. I lost contact with my dad around 10. When I was 15, he contacted me and wanted to meet up to have a better relationship and get involved in my life. 2 weeks before our agreed time, I had a bad feeling something wasn't right with him and that'd be the last time I spoke to him. He died 3 days later, a week before my husband's dad passed. We went out to dinner with him, and I told my husband that night that something was off, and I had a bad feeling about his dad. It was brushed off as him being exhausted from a long day moving. Both dads passed from heart attacks. Not me, but my soul gets the most unbelievably accurate and intuitive gut feelings. At first I was like, nah, you overthinking it, but she'd always get these super specific gut feelings about things that always turn out to be right. What made it worse is she's literally the worst I told you so type, but she's freaking always right. About everything. I've learned to listen to her gut at all costs. Knew in my gut that my dog was in imminent danger, was searching for him, but couldn't see him, and was talking myself out of trusting my feeling, because things an ex had told me about babying our dog. I asked the person I was with at the time, "Do you see Pickles?" He looked in the truck mirror, sputtered "Coyote," and we both bailed from the vehicle we were parked in. I've never run so fast in my life trying to chase that coyote to get my boy back. To no avail. When I called my ex to tell him our dog had passed, he told me he had a terrible feeling the day before that something was wrong with Pix and I, but felt weird calling to tell me this, as we were already separated for almost 2 years.